Massive moves are imminent for the Toronto Maple Leafs as we are now 24 hours away from when the Leafs have to make their decision in order to put Max Pacioretty on the lineup. We're going to break down the reports that have come out surrounding what moves are going to happen, as well as discuss Steven Lorentz. He had another phenomenal game, and he is penciling himself into that opening day lineup every single day as he continues to shine for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We're going to have to make more moves in order to make room for him as well, so there's tons to break down on this episode. But before we get into it, quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. If you're a part of the 70% who aren't subscribed, it would mean the world of Darius myself if you could hit that button. Thank you guys for allowing us to hit 13,000 subscribers. The goal now is, of course, 14,000. Your support has been unbelievable. But Darius, a lot to go over today. The Leafs had their final preseason game yesterday. Steven Lorentz shined. We had a bunch of things, and we'll discuss that briefly as well. But we're now about 24 hours away from when the Leafs have to make their decision in order to make room for Max Pacioretty. 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow on Monday. And there's a lot to discuss here because they've still yet to make the move. They're really bringing it down to the wire. And a bunch of reports now are starting to come out from writers kind of revealing the options for the Toronto Maple Leafs and what seems most likely at this point. So let's just start with this from David Alter. Now that the preseason is over, we can project the Maple Leafs 23-man roster for Monday. There's a simple way for them to do this while signing both PTOs, Pacioretty and Lorentz, to deals. And we'll get into that here in a second. But there it seems at this point, both Pacioretty, as we know, a report came out that he is going to be signing with the Leafs on a standard contract. But at this point, according to if you read between the lines, between every reporter, it seems that Steven Lorentz is going to make the Leafs opening night roster and is probably going to pencil himself into that fourth line on the wing spot in 2 days or 3 days' time.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, Steven Lorentz has looked good in this preseason, and he's the type of player that the Leafs need, right? And I think every single player on the Leafs needs to play more like Steven Lorentz because there's a lot of guys with skill in this lineup that don't have the same mentality and don't play as heavy or as hard as him. And we saw in last night's game the goal and what that fourth line can turn into with a guy like Steven Lorentz. There's a battle on the boards. Camp did a pretty good job. And then Steven Lorentz wins his battle. Ryan Reeves wins his battle pass in front. Lorentz finishes. That's exactly what a fourth line does. So I like his heavy style of play. He can really complement the Leafs on the fourth line there. I mean, he can really help the Leafs in that role. And I think at this point with him coming in on a PTO, if you let him go with how well he's played and how good he looks in that fit with the Leafs, I think it's a missed opportunity at this point. I think you should be looking at shuffling other players around because like I've said in previous videos and over the last couple of weeks, the Leafs have a lot of guys that they can just plug in different situations in different spots, but they're not real like difference makers in those roles. And I think Lorentz is not a difference maker in the game like let's say Austin Matthews or Mitch Marner offensively, but he's a difference maker in the way he plays and how heavy he plays and his ability to create plays off of his physicality. So I think it would be they would be worse off without him at this point because he's looked so good to me in the preseason. So I think he's earned himself a contract. Now, that creates a lot of complications because they're going to have to make a couple moves here, right? Whether it be waivers or sending, Easton Cowan back to the juniors a little bit earlier. They have a couple options here for sure. And David Alter got into that. It's a great article. If you want to go check it out, go check it out. But, everyone has their opinions today that, there's a lot that they could do. A lot of players could be on the way out and it's going to be exciting. But, for me, Steven Lorentz, Pacioretty, obviously we know it's going to come down at any moment here on Sunday before the deadline on Monday. But for me, Lorentz, I think you got to sign him.
Yeah, and that's not something we expected coming into the season. You can look at their cap hit. They're going to have to work some magic here, but there is a few ways to do it. Now, there is the way via a trade, and I do still think a trade is going to happen, but there's a way for them to do it without a trade. And again, the preseason is over. They have now to get under the salary cap by 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, and of course, their opening night is on Wednesday. But one way they can do this, they could make a trade, whether that's Liljegren, Cam for Järnkrok. I mean, Ryan Reeves isn't getting traded. So probably Liljegren or Cam for Järnkrok at this point. And again, Liljegren is probably the most likely one based on what we've seen. But there is another solution, Darius, here that could happen. And sometimes the simplest solution is the most likely. And it's that in the short term, again, this is a short-term replacement because they're still going to have to make a deal. But if they want to buy themselves some time, maybe they want to see if they can get a better offer for any of these guys. They can replace Connor Timmins with either Myers or Rafai, and that gives them enough to sign Lorentz at $800K and Pacioretty at about 1.105, which is about near the minimum, which is what he kind of is looking for and striving for anyway. So this might be the move that we see today or tomorrow. Probably today. It seems like a move is going to happen later today, and we'll have you covered for that. But it seems like, Darius, this could be one of the more simple options, though. That being said, it is only a short-term replacement. They're still going to have to make a move at some point regarding, Liljegren, Cam for Järnkrok. Because, I mean, at this point, if we're having this many defensemen here, then I'm still not sure how Liljegren fits into the future. But this is a short-term solution that fits the bill and that they could do today or tomorrow that doesn't shake anything up too much here.
Yeah, they don't have to go out and make a trade because at the end of the day, like we made a video yesterday on Timothy Liljegren getting traded, and I saw a lot of people saying that they're going to have to add a sweetener. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but at the end of the day, you do have to go out and try and move that player, right? So obviously, this is a more simple option. Like you said, sometimes a more simple option, more logical option is the way that they will go. But with that option as well, you're not playing Connor Timmins, and it sounds like Craig Berube likes Connor Timmins. So that to me, it kind of cancels that out in a way. And do you really want Philip Meyer in the NHL? He looks good, right? Through the preseason, he looks pretty good, but he does look a bit out of place, and he might over the course of an NHL season. So do you really want him there? Marshall Rafai has taken steps. I'm a big fan of his. We've talked about it the last couple of weeks, but is he, do you want to throw him into that situation right away? Maybe not great for his development or where he's at right now, right? So maybe you want to keep Connor Timmins and you figure, Liljegren, he's not factoring into our plans at all. I'm just, saying hypothetically, at least this is what it looks like to us. He's not factoring into our plans at all. Let's move that 3 million. And that kind of solves all of our problems right there. Right. So they still have a lot of things that they can do. There's a lot of different routes they can go. I think they're really gonna, they got to think about it today. That's for sure, because deadline is tomorrow. It's got to happen. If they want to make a trade, it's got to happen before tomorrow. But they do have a couple options here. But in looking at what the lineup has looked like, not playing Connor Timmins, I'm not sure now at this point, because it sounds like Berube likes him and he has more NHL experience than a couple of the other guys mentioned as well. So something to consider as well.
Yeah, it seems logical, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really line up with how they've been playing out this preseason with Connor Timmins. But let us know in the comments your thoughts are. And continuing on the Steven Lorentz thing, he, after his goal yesterday, he said he blacked out a little bit there, just knowing that things have come full circle and to come to the rink as a kid and watching as a young guy and then being able to do that and put my arms over my head. It was a pretty special feeling. And he's basically also come out and said that, hey, I've done my job on my PTO. It's now up to the team to sign him to a contract. I think this guy could help very much on the fourth line for the Toronto Maple Leafs. That being said, you still have an abundance of players that can play the fourth line. Now you have, depending on how David Kampf is still on the team. He's probably going to stay. Yarncroc, you have Lorentz now at this point. You still have Connor Dewar when he comes back. You have Ryan Reeves when he comes back. So there's so many guys that can play that third/fourth line. In this case, Lorentz is probably playing the fourth line. It's starting to get a little bit interesting now, especially if they decide to, keep Lorentz, which it seems like they're going to do. Maybe they don't let Cowan play the 8 or 9 games. At this point, we both thought it was kind of set in stone there. I don't know exactly where he fits in or who he kicks out of the lineup, because ultimately they're trying to win hockey games, and Cowan hasn't showed it in this preseason at least. But ultimately, I think some of the other guys, at least from the front office and coaching perspective, they'd rather have some of the other guys, like in this case, maybe even Steven Lorentz manning that fourth line. And ultimately, Darius, Cowan might not start with the Maple Leafs after all. Any quick final thoughts for a wrap up?
Yeah, it's not looking likely at this point. When we look, if you go back to before camp, it was looking like, to us at least, and we were very confident that he was going to make the team. But I wasn't expecting training camp to be this competitive and how many guys were going to come in. Like, I don't think any of us could have seen Max Pacioretty coming in. Steven Lorentz was a welcome surprise. So obviously there was a lot of competition, and we know Berube likes identity across his lineup and through his line. So I think it's a very likely possibility that Cowan goes back to the OHL, maybe sooner rather than later at this point, also because of cap complications too. And the Leafs are on a mission to win the Stanley Cup, right? Easton Cowan can join them later. He doesn't have to join the team this year, but would have been a nice welcome surprise if Cowan made the team, but it's not looking very likely at this point, and that's fine. He'll go back to London, he'll work on his defensive game and other little aspects of his game, the details, and he'll be fine.
Yeah, let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on this. Moves are coming, and we'll keep you up to date with all the latest. So make sure to subscribe button. We'll see you later.